welcome to another episode of Rubbin' is Racing. I'm your host, Mr. CJ Sports. In the studio with me, as always, my co-host, Steve Big Sweat Billmeyer. How you doing tonight?
Doing great.
I've come ever so close to changing the name of the show from Rubbin' is Racing to the Joe Gibbs Racing Hour because seems that's all we get to talk about still these days. Another great weekend for Joe Gibbs Racing, especially Sunday, with all four of their cars, I want to say top seven, and then to include Martin Truex, you had all five cars in the top 8 or 9, so another great weekend with Joe Gibbs Racing, and I'm sure we're going to have plenty to talk about that and at Richmond. Just looking forward to jumping into this. Did you have a great weekend, Steve?
Absolutely. I really enjoyed watching the racing. It was really good. It definitely is sending the message to NASCAR that we need more short track racing. It's been the best racing I've seen all year. It's been in the past month with the short tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it proves the point that we need to eliminate some of these mile-and-a-half track races and involve more short track racing.
As I say, as much as I agree, we do have Talladega coming up next weekend, and I am all about super speedway. But I agree, the mile and a half, the oversaturation of mile and a half tracks is a little bit much, and I could go for. Honestly, I wish they would build another super speedway, but obviously that's not going to happen. But
speedway, a road course, a short track, anything but a mile and a half track.
I would say I could definitely go for another short track, or I'm sorry, another road course in there. But I'm still lobbying for a road course in the Chase. So
yeah.
So we'll see on all that. Richmond, a fun track to watch. Of course, they went to Sunday day driving instead of the Saturday night racing we had been used to, and I guess there's a lot of mixed feelings on that whole topic. And I believe you're a Sunday race fan. I don't know. I'm a fan of Saturday night racing. I know it's not traditional, and don't get me wrong. I don't want every race to be Saturday night, but then again, there's also something to me. Saturday night short track racing. That's why Bristol Saturday night race is probably my favorite race. It was neck to neck with even being at the 500. I enjoy some Saturday night racing and at the local or at the short track. So I kind of had mixed emotions with watching the race yesterday, but I sat there and watched it nonetheless. I don't know. There's just something about Saturday night racing.
You cut out on me. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. There's something about the temperature change. The
Hello?
lights. Can you hear me? Can you still hear me, Steve?
Hello?
Unfortunately for Steve, he's having technical difficulties. That's one of the reasons why we had a late start. Hopefully he'll call back. Unfortunately, that's the reason why we had a late start. Is he is having technical difficulties with his phone with Time Warner. He had actually been trying to call for 20 minutes before he finally got through. And he said that he had been trying to call his own mama, and it just wasn't working. So hopefully we'll get him back on here. But like I said, this weekend was they'd moved it to back to Sunday racing, and I kind of have mixed emotions about that. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the Saturday night racing. Underneath the lights, the temperature change, the track change. Just everything about it and underneath the lights. I don't know. I'm just a big fan of it. I'm kind of funny with that, like that. Like I said, that's kind of why Saturday night Bristol it's got to be my favorite race that I've been to up to this point, even to include the Daytona 500, or at least neck to neck with the the Daytona. Are we good?
Yeah, I'm back.
But nonetheless, Sunday. And like I said, I know you're more of a fan of Sunday racing. How glad are you to have Richmond back on a Sunday afternoon versus it being a Saturday night race?
The thing I liked about the Sunday afternoon race at Richmond and the Sunday afternoon race at Bristol is on an afternoon race, you've got the sun beating down on the track, changing the track conditions, making the track slick, and it makes the drivers have to drive harder. At night, on a Saturday night, the track cools off and the grip improves, and you don't get the stuff like you got toward the end of yesterday's race with Carl Edwards and Kyle Busch, hanging on. They've got the rear end hung out coming off the corners, and they're trying to race and hang on to the car at the same time. And that's one of the biggest things I like about a Sunday afternoon race is you've got the track that changes more toward the bad than it does to the good, and it just seems to make the racing better. And like I said, it makes the drivers have to work harder.
I can see that. I don't know. I've always been a fan of Saturday night racing. The few races they get, like I said, I don't want them to oversaturate it like they do with the mile and a half tracks, but there's just something about the temperature change, the track changing throughout the night, underneath the lights, just kind of a different way to look at the race, and it's all different, and that's why I love some Saturday night racing. And not that it took anything away from this Sunday, and I think Sunday got to be really interesting, and I think that I think we're all a little surprised on how that race ended. Not only because they were teammates, but also because this was Kyle Busch, and I don't think anybody would have imagined that Kyle Busch would have let a race on the last lap slip like he did. I think I don't know, my opinion, and we're going to talk a little bit about this here in a minute. I just think that he assumed that was his teammate, and that was good to go. And he had nothing to worry about. And obviously, Carl Edwards had other plans. But going into this weekend, we had Tony Stewart returning to the NASCAR, the Sprint Cup Series. A long overdue wait for him to return. Glad to see, one, he was healthy and was able to be cleared and get back into a race car. Unfortunately, quickly NASCAR turned this into something it shouldn't have been, and it should have been about his return to NASCAR, him finally getting to do his farewell tour, us be able to sit back and kind of reminisce about Tony Stewart and the great things he has done in the racing community, and what he's done for other people, and what he's done for the sport. And then, unfortunately, turn of events because of lug nuts. It was more about what Tony Stewart said and the driver council, and whether or not he was paying the fine or the driver council was paying the fine, and just a lot of other things that this weekend shouldn't have been about, in my opinion. Your thoughts on what Tony Stewart said, what the NASCAR originally said, and where we at? Where are we at now when it comes to this whole lug nuts, the fine? What NASCAR is now doing to change the rule, because it looks like they are making some modifications to it. What's your whole thought on this with Tony Stewart?
The Tony Stewart deal, I absolutely think NASCAR was 100% correct in fining him. He deserves to be fined for what he said. In 2002, NASCAR put a bulletin out to all the drivers and teams and everything, and I quote, because I've read this a lot this weekend, but this is a direct quote: "If anyone takes it upon themselves to criticize our safety efforts during an interview with one of our media affiliates, they will be fined. it doesn't get any more black and white than that. Tony opened his mouth, he said what he said, and NASCAR did what they said they would do. As far as I'm concerned, case closed, Tony. You were wrong. Pay the damn fine and move on. But no, people have got to turn this into a big to-do. And now, today NASCAR announced they're changing the lug nut policies to enforce having 5 lug nuts on during the race as best that they can without putting an official out on pit road. And now everybody's saying, well, NASCAR, that just proves NASCAR screwed up. They don't know what's going on, da-da-da-da-da. And to that I say, people, have you never tried something that didn't work? Have you ever made a mistake in judgment thinking something's going to work and it didn't? Instead of giving NASCAR a hard time about it, why not take a minute and realize that they're trying to help the sport? They're trying things that they've never tried before to try to make the racing better, and some of it's going to work and some of it's not. The low downforce package worked. The lug nut deal, not so good. So, I hate to see people get on NASCAR, and especially Brian France, about this. How do you criticize somebody for trying to make something better? And I'm glad to see NASCAR, going back over and adopting and changing the rules to try to make it better and everything. I think it's a very, very remote possibility that a tire would come off because of loose lug nuts and fly into the grandstands. I just don't recall seeing that happen. I mean, it's been a while since I've even seen a tire come off other than on pit road where the car left too early and they didn't get the lug nuts on and everything. But I think Kurt Busch, at Homestead around 2004, really the last time I saw a tire come off a car on the track. So I'm glad NASCAR's doing something about it to try to ensure fan safety above all costs, but I think at the same time they're doing it to kind of pacify the drivers and some of the fans.
And I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence because I felt that NASCAR didn't side in the air of safety when they decided to go with this whole lug nut thing. And I understand the tires are just not falling off these cars, but at the same time, what happens if a tire did come off? And let's say that tire happened to make its way down the pit road, went through the grass,
Jeez, bounced. My phone is killing me. You're breaking up again.
What happens if it bounces through pit road, bounces through the grass into pit road, and then bounces over the wall? That was kind of my big concern. Like I said, I know it's not one of those things that happens all the time.
I still can't understand you. Let me call you back on another phone.
Oh goodness, the world of technology. Anyway, we'll continue on while we wait for Steve to try to get back in here in the studio. That was my big concern was, okay, what happens if a tire does come off? What happens if a team tries to short the pit stop enough that they're only doing 3 lug nuts and something happens? A cross thread or just something happens. The tire, manages to get itself loose and finds itself coming off the car as they come out of turn 4 or even to a tri-oval. And what happens if that tire makes its way through the grass, just kind of, hits a bump or two, bounces through, doesn't really lose any momentum, goes down pit road, and then, happens to bounce over, the pit road wall. and with the families, with the fans, with the crews, with the officials. Ain't nobody stopping that tire. Um, it's either going to have to hit something or it's going to hit somebody. And it hits somebody, it's still going to keep going. And so that was my big concern. And where I had my concerns on, them making this modification to the lug nuts policy. And so I'm more glad that they're at least revisiting this. I think they need all 5 lug nuts. I don't care how they police it. I don't care how they police it. I just feel that there needs to be 5 lug nuts in a sport that is worked so hard in going in the direction of being as safe as possible. I just feel that there needs to be a way to police it, and there's got to be 5 lug nuts, at least an attempt to have 5 lug nuts on there. With instant replay, they ain't got to have somebody out there. There's enough video that if NASCAR wanted, they can find a way to go back and instant replay every pit stop as they get done and ensure that those are on there. So,
yeah, let me give you my take on it. Number one, like you said, there's enough video going on, and the problem seems to be on the right side tires, which take more weight, and the wheel takes more pressure due to centrifugal force. I mean, they're sitting up there in the tower. You can count how many times the tire changers jab that gun in and out going around those lug nuts. And, they're not going to fake doing 5 and only doing 4 because it takes just as long to fake it as it does to actually put it on. My way of thinking, as an ex-crew chief and an occasional tire changer, is when the tire carrier hangs the tire on the hub and he puts it up there on the studs, say that they've only got 4 lugs glued on and the open hole is at 12 o'clock. The tire changer has to start at the lug nut at 2 o'clock and go clockwise around because they run about between 90 and 120 pounds of pressure per square inch of nitrogen in those guns, and they're so powerful, the torque twists that gun around, and it also twists the tire changer's hand and wrist. So they go clockwise to take advantage of the torque to go around the lug nuts. If he doesn't start at the first open lug nut, if he skips the one at 2 o'clock and starts at the one at, say, 4 o'clock, when he gets to the third one, which would be about 10 o'clock, then he has to go back across the wheel to get that one that he missed, and he has to pull the gun out farther to get around the center cap and the center of the hub where the outer wheel bearing is mounted. It sticks out farther than lug studs do, so he's got to pull the gun out farther. He's lost seconds there. He lost seconds having to look to see where to start and everything. So you start losing split seconds, and it adds up to a second or more, and then you've lost the advantage you had of using 4 instead of 5 lug nuts. You also lose, if you've only got 4 lug nuts on there, you've lost 20% of the grip strength that holds that wheel on. And then if you don't get all 4 lugs tight, if you have one loose, then you've lost almost half of the grip strength. You've lost 40% because you've only got 3 lugs on there. And that's what produces the loose wheel effect. And once that wheel gets loose and it starts wallowing that lug nut hole out and stripping the threads on the lug nut stud, you've really lost a lot more time than you gained. From my point of view, I see no advantage to doing 4 lug nuts. If I was on the box yesterday, I would have done 5 lugs every time and taken a chance on losing a few tenths of a second, but not having to worry so much about having to come back in under green and lose a couple of laps for a loose wheel.
Now, from what I'm seeing, the series said a tire falling off in a Sprint Cup race due to improper installation would mean a minimum 4-race suspension of the crew chief and other crew members involved. If lug nuts are found missing after a race, Cup teams face at least a $20,000 fine and a 1-race suspension for the crew chief. The penalties obviously are less for the Xfinity and Truck Series, but still substantial for the lower-funded teams. NASCAR said a long-term solution was in the works. Both of those fines of these, would that be unreasonable for NASCAR to have those as the guideline, a 4-race suspension if your tire just does come off, and $20,000 fine and a 1-race suspension if they do find out you're not putting the lug nuts on or putting lug nuts on?
I don't really know how to say this right, but the crew chiefs they're not going to try to cheat the rule, but they're going to try to beat the rule. So NASCAR has got to put some kind of effective penalty in place to curb them trying to get around that rule. And, I don't think a fine is that big a deal. A lot of times these guys get fined and the car owner and the team pay the fine for them. So that's not a deterrent. A suspension, you take the crew chief off the box, you take the tire carrier and the tire changer out of the picture, and you've made a dent in their race plan for the next year. So I'm all for it. I would even be for it if they did a 2-race suspension. Something to keep them, I don't want to say keep them honest, but, keep them where they're not trying to beat the system so much, where they're trying to adapt to the system and work the system as best they can to their advantage.
We finally talk about getting to the race. It was an interesting race.
It was a good race.
Yes. Strategy obviously come into play. Tires, the fall off. It's remarkable to me to hear drivers talk about, yes, this is what we wanted. We wanted a tire to fall off. Being a fan and sitting here and doing this, I would think that the drivers would want equipment that lasts forever, not a tire that I'm not going to say intentionally falls off, but is designed to fall off at some point and has only got so much life to it. And I kind of chuckle every time I hear that, because I'm under the impression drivers just want equipment that's going to last forever, no fall off, just be able to turn the fastest laps possible and just be able to whip around the track. And so to hear these different drivers talk about, this is what we wanted, this is the tire we wanted, I kind of got a chuckle every time I hear it.
Yeah, the thing is, on pole day, on qualifying day, that's the day drivers want to go as fast as they can. That's the day they want to show that they have the fastest car and they're the fastest driver and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Come race day, they want to race. They want to get in there door handle to door handle, fender to fender, and race somebody else that is their equal or even a better driver than they are to prove how good they are and everything. I think drivers really like the combination, especially at Richmond, of the low downforce package, the tire that Goodyear brought, and the change in track positions. That makes them work that much harder, and when you work that much harder, the end result is more satisfying to you.
I tell you what, this whole new package, the tires, it's definitely made racing a lot more interesting. I can't recall a year that the racing to me has been as great as it has been. Even though we got to sit here and talk about Joe Gibbs Racing being victorious every single weekend. Outside of that, I don't think you could complain about in Joe Gibbs Racing, a Joe Gibbs Racing fan. Really have nothing to complain about at all. Outside of that, I don't think there's really anything you could complain about when it comes to the performance, what we're seeing on the track.
No, and it's the interesting thing to me. One of the interesting things about the Richmond race was at Bristol the week before, you had Clint Boyer in the top 10, Matt DiBenedetto, I hope I said that right, in the top 10. Various other, I don't want to say so much low-budget teams, but people you didn't expect to be running up front and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then you went to Richmond, and as expected, the 4 Joe Gibbs cars were up front. Martin Truex's satellite team was up front. All 4 of the Hendrick cars finished well. The 2 Penske cars finished well. And 2 of the 4 Stewart-Haas teams also finished up front. So it kind of fell back to the standard pecking order of the big teams dominating. So it's, it kind of makes me wonder, what's going to happen when we circle back around and come back to these short tracks. Is it going to be cases of the bigger teams absolutely dominating pretty much like they did yesterday? Or are some of the low-budget teams going to get in there and mix things up? To me, it's really good to see those low-budget teams, to see new faces in there running good. So I hope that end it continues. But as dominant as Joe Gibbs Racing has been, it's going to be tough. People, y'all have your work cut out for you if you're going to try to beat those JGR Toyotas.
Now, I want to make one more comment about the Tony Stewart thing real quick, and then we'll get back to what he's talking about. I remember, I just hadn't remembered this when I was talking about. Of course, the driver council was talking about paying the $35,000 fine. Tony Stewart said that he was going to go ahead and pay the fine. That was his fine to pay, but was going to use that money, the $30,000, the drivers council was going to give, and give that to, I want to say it was an autism foundation or charity. So at least when it was all said and done, we got to kind of see, well, we got to hear more publicly about the things we already knew Tony Stewart was doing, and just being the great person that he is and trying to help everybody that he can help. And so in hindsight, it did kind of work out in everybody's favor when it was all said and done, and that was really cool.
That was the first time I've actually heard Tony Stewart say, I'm going to donate this or I'm going to donate that.
Mm-hmm.
He does so much behind the scenes that he doesn't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
He donates a lot of his time, a lot of his money. He donates his airplane. Anything he can do to help a lot of charitable organizations, he does. And he doesn't do it for the publicity or anything. Like I said, he doesn't talk about it. This is the first time that I can recall hearing him say, I'm going to donate this to a certain cause. He usually just does it behind the scenes and goes on about his business, and that's very admirable to me. You can talk about Tony's anger problems and everything else, but the bottom line is the dude's got a heart, and he's a great guy.
Richmond this weekend was a little bit different in the fact that we got to see 3 and 4 wide racing. Like they were all over that track, and I even think Jeff Gordon throughout that whole race was just amazed on how many different lines and variations that we got to see. Was it different for you to be able to sit here and watch these guys run all over this track?
Yeah, definitely so. I think it was because the track conditions were changing and everything. So much was changing with the handling of the cars. The drivers we're having to get out there and hunt for a fast line now, like a dirt track driver would. You got to find the quickest line through the corners, and I think that's what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now they were running the high line, the low line, in the middle of the corners, anywhere their car would handle. They were trying to find that line and trying to utilize it. And that's, back again, that's another great thing about the low downforce package and everything. It's not like it used to be where your car was so aero dependent, you found the quickest line and you stayed on that line the whole race.
Mm-hmm.
Because, your car didn't give up anything because of so much aero. I just, I like the direction racing is heading now in all three of the top NASCAR series. I really think that they're really trying to improve the product, and they're doing that. They're accomplishing that. And the bottom line is it just makes for better racing, and people are saying, no, the racing's not that good. You can tell nobody's in the stands, everything. There was a lot of empty seats at Richmond, but I don't think it was because of the racing. I think what brings those empty seats out now is people have limited money to spend on races. They might not be able to afford to go but to 2 or 3 races a year. So they're kind of holding off until the chase races. And I'm going to be watching to see if the crowds increase when the chase starts. If that's why nobody's at the racetracks now, because they're waiting for the more exciting chase races and they'd rather be at those.
Oh, most definitely. Leading up to and of course we definitely got to talk about the last lap. First time a last lap change for the lead on the last lap in Richmond. But before we get into talking about that, what are some of the things? Cause you see things differently, and I see when it comes to the in between the start and finish and different strategies, especially with your experience of being around NASCAR and being involved with NASCAR. What are some of the things that you noticed about Sunday's race that the listeners might not have picked up on, or I might not have picked on that need to be pointed out, or that you wanted to talk about?
The last few laps of the race, you could kind of see Kyle Busch kind of easing up a little bit, trying to keep his car really off the wall and off from spinning out, because him and Carl, had been on their tires for a while. Their tires were wearing out. Grip was a factor. There just wasn't much left. And the combination of him trying to save his car but still run hard enough to stay in front of Carl, and Carl just balls to the wall, would honk that car down into the corner and just drive it in just as deep as he could and hope it would stick. Sometimes it didn't stick, and you would see him get a little squirrely, and Kyle Busch would gain a couple of car lengths on him, and Carl would have to reel him back in. And that's pretty much what happened on the last lap. Carl, got the white flag, and he said, well, this is it. And he honked that car on down into turn 1, as deep as he could, hoping that it would stick, and it stuck, and it got him up to Kyle Busch, close enough where in turns 3 and 4, he could make the move to win the race, we'll say.
Teammates. This is always an interesting topic for me. On where do teammates draw the line? How hard do you push a teammate? How much do you respect your teammates? And I don't want to say necessarily respect, but there's got to be some kind of, well, I would imagine, when it comes to team racing, there's got to be some kind of code or some kind of, I don't know, understanding on how far we are to push each other to when it comes down to the final few laps, or when it comes to someone winning or coming to win a championship. One was, I'm not gonna say was Carl Edwards wrong, because I don't feel that he was wrong with what he did. I would have done the same thing too. I guess more of being the new guy on the team, or at least the newest member of the team, and still, I don't know, still trying to find his way. And obviously this year is coming along a lot better for all the drivers, but for Carl Edwards going back to back, was you kind of surprised that he was as aggressive as he was on that last lap? I don't know. I think that Kyle Busch was, I don't know, to me he was relaxed, like just assumed that, okay, it's cousin Carl, he's not going to push the issue. We're going to finish 1-2, and that being me win the race and him finish second. He won just last week. That this is how things are going to finish. It's kind of how I'm thinking things went in Kyle Busch's head, and sadly was mistaken when Carl Edwards dived into turn 1, 2, and 3 and 4 to go ahead and take the win. Was you surprised that Carl Edwards made the move?
Not at all. Not at all. Mike Skinner said when he was driving that he would dump his grandmother to get a win. These other drivers aren't going to say that, but that's the attitude they got. When it gets down to crunch time, they're going to do whatever it takes to win. You get down around 5 laps to go, you have no teammates, you have no friends, you have no family. Anybody out your windshield in front of your hood is a victim. It's somebody in your way of getting to the win. So it didn't surprise me a bit that Carl put the bump and run on Kyle. And I think if the roles had been reversed, Kyle would have done the same thing.
Yeah, but we expect that out of Kyle, though. I mean, that's Kyle Busch.
Yeah. Well, and then again, those two have had issues before at Richmond. I remember one of the night races, I think Kyle took Carl out, the bump and run for the win, and Carl came around on the cool-down lap and just dumped Kyle. They've had issues before, so they can be all lovey-dovey in public and everything, but they don't forget. Carl, I'm sure, remembered that, and not necessarily a payback, but it's, I'm going to race you the way you race me. And, that's what happened. And people think, well, he's cousin Carl, he's always smiling, he's a nice guy and everything. The dude's a racer. Get down to 5 laps to go, and he's got the coldest heart of anybody out there. And Jeff Gordon was the same way. Jeff was a nice guy and everything, but straps him in a car and his personality totally changes. So I wasn't the least bit surprised that Carl did that. And he did it in a way where it didn't hurt Kyle's car or anything. He just gave him a tap, moved him out of the way, and went on and took the checkers and got to kiss the beauty queens in victory lane.
How much different would that have been, do you think, if Kyle Busch wouldn't have held on to that? Because he got pretty loose with that little nudge. How differently do you think things would have been, or the conversation would have been between the Joe Gibbs Racing organization if Kyle Busch wouldn't have been able to hold on to that car?
Well, either way, it would be an interesting driver crew chief meeting on Tuesday morning, because I'm sure, there's going to be some hard looks, maybe not any harsh words, but I'm sure that it didn't, you could tell, it didn't sit well with Kyle, but I don't know, I couldn't really tell if it was because his teammate did that, or if that was just typical Kyle Busch, that he just hates to lose so much. and he had lost that race on the final corner coming to the checkers. I think more than anything, that's what was bothering Kyle. I don't think it was so much, my teammate took me out. It was just I lost. And if Kyle could have hung on to it, it would have been a hell of a run to that start-finish line between those two, because they would have been sideways and side by side, and it would have been.
They might have been sideways.
I think it would have been a lot similar to Ricky Craven and Kurt Busch when they finished side by side at Darlington, beating and banging on each other. Either way, it was going to be a good show.
Oh yeah, and you could tell by that post-race interview that Kyle Busch wasn't happy, and he just kind of left it as that's racing, and you could tell that he was very disappointed, and I agree. I don't know if it's so much his teammate. I'm sure that was kind of, like I said, I honestly believe that Kyle Busch, in the back of his mind, even though they're racers, and this is how their livelihood goes, I honestly believe he thought, you know what, he didn't have none for me up to this point. He's just going to go ahead and settle second place. I got this. Let's just cruise around, not worry about these lap cars, because a couple of them held him up there towards the end. A couple of them got a little loose and got it kind of sideways there in front of them, and I think that was just kind of, okay, I got this. Let's chill. Let's just not get wrapped up in anybody's mess on this last lap, and we're home free. And when Carl Edwards dived into turn 1 and 2 and saw that there was a little let up on Kyle Busch, I think that opened an opportunity that Kyle Busch was not expecting, and I don't think he could recover in time. I think Carl Edwards had the momentum once he came out of 1-2, and made it kind of impossible for Kyle Busch to be able to hold him off. I watched Samantha Busch. Obviously, they showed her and her rooting her man on and everything else. And I until right before the show, I had no idea this was even a big issue, because it's not like she said it on national TV that you could hear. You kind of had to read her lips, if I'm not mistaken, unless there was something else I missed. But the fans and those making a big deal for the fact that Samantha Busch said shit. What do you expect? I mean, it wasn't something you heard over the radio. And we've talked about that in prior shows, that you can't, unfortunately, and is the reason why I'll never rent one of the radios to listen in, because I want the uncut, unmonitored, unedited version. And if I'm only going to get daisies and rainbows, I'm not going to waste my time anyway. It wasn't like it was a post-race interview on Fox 1 and someone dropped the S-bomb, her or a driver. This was people reading her lips, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm assuming they're talking about. What do you expect? I watched an NBA game, and I could hear them yelling across the court and hearing cuss words, and nobody apologized, and you actually could hear those, and it's not that it was intentional, and not that the players knew that the microphones had picked it up, because they were clear across the court or somewhere else on the court. It wasn't like it was a post-game interview or in between the quarter interview. It was them in the middle of action going on, and a cuss word had slipped. So, what are fans? What is the big deal?
You've just got these Kyle Busch haters that sit back and look for a reason to hate and to put him down and everything. She posted on Facebook yesterday an explanation and an apology, sort of, about that and everything. If she hadn't have posted that, you had no proof that she said shit.
Mm-hmm.
She could have just as easily had said shoot, and it would look the exact same way. Her lips would move the exact same way. And without her actually saying so, it did get broadcast, so you don't really know what she said. But everybody jumped up on it to begin with and everything. And, what do you expect? If you're married, what do you think your wife would do in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
She's not going to sit there and go, way to go, Carl.
Yeah.
She's disappointed.
Yeah.
She might be a little mad. She's upset, And what's the first thing that comes to your mind is shit. And I saw where Dale Jr.
Yeah.
sent her a tweet with that word in it about 5 different times. And Junior's been fined for saying shit on TV that you could hear and everything. So I think it just got instantly blown way out of proportion and everything. And then again, you've got the haters, and they're not looking at the whole picture. They're just looking for something to justify their hate, to justify their opinion. And it's kind of sad, really, but that's just the way racing is now.
One, if you're out there listening and you are a fan of anybody but Kyle Busch, and you honestly believe that whoever you cheer for, if their husband or wife has never cussed because their significant other lost a race, you are sadly mistaken. Very sadly mistaken. I love Samantha's passion and her commitment to her husband's career and how involved, how dedicated she is to it. It's got to be tough. It's got to be tough to be on the road 36 week race weekends, not to include every race that he participates in, not to include the stuff he does outside of that, not to include any other forms of racing that he decides to do or anything else. She has committed herself, her life, to be a race car driver's wife, to raise a family, and she does a very good job of it. If I'm married to somebody, I want that kind of passion. You know, I marry somebody now, I want them to be very passionate about the 110 Nation. I want them to be very passionate about where our numbers are, how we're doing this, that, and the other. And so that gives me, you know, kind of a guideline of what I want if I ever decide to ever get married, is to have somebody that passionate about what I do and be upset if I am not able to be, you know, victorious or be as successful and kind of motivate me to push it just that much farther. So, you know, what she did, and, you know, regardless of what she said, I have all of the respect in the world for Samantha, because she's very dedicated and very passionate about what Kyle does and the sport, and is very involved. And she's one of those few wives that, honestly, I think has influence when it comes to NASCAR. I mean, I honestly believe if there was really an important issue or something that, you know, that involved or had something to do with females or just the sport in general that she was very passionate about, I honestly believe she is one of very few wives out there that could form some kind of council or some kind of backing that, you know, for the better of the sport, could give support, you know, the support and have an influence on something changing in NASCAR.
Her and Delana Harvick are the two I can think of that are real passionate about racing. They're real passionate about the sport, but their number one priority is their husband. That's the one that they're more interested in what he does than anything else that happens. They're going to do whatever they can to make their husband better at what he does. There's no denying Kyle Busch's attitude change in the past couple of years since he's been married to Samantha. I mean, you know, it's I don't want to say he's grown up, but that's kind of what's happened. He's matured. And it's, you know, it's not because he's gotten older, it's because of Samantha. Samantha helping him and help guide him, and, you know, I'm sure when they're in bed at night, you know, she's going, well, maybe you shouldn't have done this, or you shouldn't have said that, or something. But she's like his coach and his confidant. And I think Joe Gibbs, I think Coach realizes this too. And he's glad for the passion that she brings, and she's glad for the stability that she gives him and everything, because it definitely makes him a better race car driver.
Most definitely. And like, you know, like I said, she's one of those, you know, you're right, Delana is probably another one, but is very passionate about it. There's not too many wives like that, and it is good. To me, it makes the driver better. It motivates them. It pushes them. And it makes home life easier. You know, I grew up when 15 years, and I did not have that significant other that pushed me and was motivated or passionate about the 110 Nation and what I was doing. And ultimately that ended up killing that relationship because she didn't have that passion. It was more of a inconvenience and a distraction of what she wanted. And having someone like Samantha Bush in your corner, that's got to, people talk about how does Kyle Busch, do all these races and, everything he does. Well, when you have somebody like Samantha in your corner, that is, let's do everything we can now. Let's make the best and the most of our opportunity while you still are physically able to do it. And go, 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 because one day you're not going to be able to do this, and we're going to be able to retire and have, a very wealthy, healthy life together. It makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, it does, and I like Samantha's attitude and everything, and I look 180 degrees different at Chandra Johnson, Jimmy Johnson's wife. You see her on the pit walk like Michael Waltrip, you see her before he gets in the car, and then you don't see her again except maybe in Victory Lane. She is pretty much non-existent, She's, I don't know, I just, I don't see any kind of motivation or anything from her, and if that works for Jimmy, that's fine, He's done great, so it's not really hurting him, but Chandra and Samantha are two totally different types of personalities, and I like Samantha's attitude. I think that's great to have somebody in your corner.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the greatest thing in the world. And I think a lot of what Jimmy Johnson accomplishes is because of Jimmy Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now a lot of what Kyle Busch is accomplishing is because of Kyle Busch and his family.
Yes. Most definitely agree. I tell you what, there's when especially in a competitive sport and as much traveling as they do, there's no better way to do it than having someone in your corner that is there for you. And I can see Samantha Bush down on pit road fighting people. Like I can see.
Oh yeah, just like Delana Harvick. Delana Harvick. She would kick your ass if you messed too hard with Kevin. I mean, she's that protective, and she's been around racing all her life, and she just doesn't care. She's not a manly woman, but to use Samantha Bush's phrase, Delana don't take no shit. and that's what I like about her.
Yes. Got to thank Tony Stewart and Dale Jr. for stepping in and giving their 2 cents. I thought that was really cool. Stewart pretty much saying, don't worry about other people's opinions. They don't matter. And then, of course, Junior with his tweet and talking about shit happens and don't take shit and every other way he could use that word in his tweet. I thought that was entertaining. But, it's good to see the drivers stick up. And, I think at some point, speaking of Junior, I think at some point his girlfriend, I think if that continues and ends up being a lot more than what it even is at this point, I don't know if she'll ever be as passionate as Samantha or Delana, but I can see her kind of being the next closest thing to it. I think she very passionate, and of course, with the name and the importance of the name in the sport, I think that she will carry that well. And she might not have the same desire and the same passion as Delana or Samantha, but I think that she will carry that in a different direction, which will be just as valuable to Junior as it is to Kyle and Kevin.
Yeah, I don't see her being the Samantha Bush type.
Yeah.
I think she's more of a photo op looking for a place to happen. I think she enjoys the notoriety of being going to be Mrs. Dale Earnhardt Jr., but I just don't see any passion in her. I've seen one tweet in the past couple of years where she said something about something that's happened with Junior on the track or something that didn't go his way. But I don't see the passion. I don't know. I guess she's more of a trophy wife than anything else. But, you know, who knows what goes on when they're away from the track and everything. But I just, you know, I can't see her climbing down off the box and stomping down to somebody else's pit and raising a fuss. I just don't see that.
No, most definitely. Like I said, hers, I think it's more of, I think she will carry that name well. I think she knows the history of that name and the importance to that name in NASCAR. And I think that she will do the right thing. She might not be as passionate. She might not have that fire. And she might not have a lot of time in the spotlight other than maybe the photo opportunities. But I think that she will carry herself in a way that I think Pops would be happy with. I think Dale Sr. would be proud of how she carries herself as a lady. And that's more of what I was looking at on her.
Yeah, she's gonna be a lot like Teresa Earnhardt. You know, the only time you really saw Teresa was in Victory Lane and before the race. But behind the scenes, with what she did, getting Senior to trademark his name and start the souvenir sales and all that, I think she could offer that a lot more to Dale Jr.
Mm.
So much, you know, being a spark plug or anything like that. I think she'll do a lot behind the scenes for Junior, and she'll represent him well in public.
Most definitely. Any other things that we didn't touch on? Obviously, if I read that right, Senior. Wow, there you go. Junior won the Xfinity Series race and dominated the race lap-wise. I think he led all but like 26 laps, if I read that right. Is there anything else we missed? I'm trying to read. Imagine if Sandra was like Samantha, paired with her husband with 6 titles. Got that message in. Mike's listening into the show.
The thing that I really liked seeing was Junior didn't do a burnout after he won the Xfinity race. He's kind of realized, you know, this burnout thing is played out. The donuts are played out. You know, it's time to move on to something else. And I'm the same way, you know. I'm just so tired of seeing people just doing burnouts and a couple of donuts. And, you know, it's just not exciting anymore. It doesn't interest me a bit, you know. You want to do a burnout and a donut and interest me? Do it like Kyle Larson did that time where you're hanging out of the window holding the steering wheel outside the car and doing a donut. That's impressive to me. Other than that, you know, it's time to move on, and I was just really glad. I was surprised, but I was really glad when he didn't do a burnout. I thought, well, that's cool. That's classy.
And I agree. I'm not big on the whole burnout thing. I enjoy the backflip. My favorite still to this point right now is Kyle Busch, the whole bow. I mean, knowing that it pretty much is telling all the haters, F you. This is the censored version of what I really want to tell you all that are booing. Go ahead and take it. I enjoy that. Kyle Larson's burnouts by far has got to be one of the best. I have a lot of respect for Brad Keselowski. I'm not a big fan of Brad Keselowski, but I have a lot of respect for him and the American flag, and then also know that he donates the proceeds from that to help out the soldiers. And regardless of your feelings of Brad Keselowski, that is one thing that he's got to earn. Those patriotic fans, at least, their respect in some sort of fashion. So there's a few out there, and I wish drivers would come up with some more original ideas. Just watching burnouts and donuts, it gets to be old. Be original. Come up with something. Tony Stewart climbing the fence. You got different drivers that get creative. It's your opportunity. You're in the spotlight. Don't do something everybody else is doing. Do something that kind of puts you different than everybody else. And even as much as I'm not an Austin Dillon fan, to watch him go try to slide through the grass in between the front stretch or the trioval wherever he happens to win and pit road, that's entertaining. I mean, it's something different.
Yeah, Kyle Busch has pretty much got the best victory celebration when he climbs up on the car and does that exaggerated bow to the crowd and everything. And, it really fires up his haters and everything. But at the same time, he's thinking when he bows down, he's like, hey, haters, my ass is up in the air. Take a bite, It's his way of getting back at him without really, doing anything that would make headlines or be negative or anything. Him and, like you said, Brad Keselowski, they pretty much have the best post-victory celebration, so to speak, in the way they show their emotion and how they feel about winning and everything. I think that's great. And the one thing I really hate about the burnout is, even though they're probably not going to use that motor again or those parts in that engine again, it's still, destroying a good engine. And then sometimes they'll melt the tires and it'll beat the fenders out and everything. I mean, why do any extra damage to the car after the race? If you get through the race, no damage, take it home that way. Make it a little easier on the guys at the shop.
Oh, yeah. Most definitely. I tell you what, next Monday's going to be definitely something different. Go from the short track racing to Talladega, 2.66 miles of bump drafting, pack racing, restrictor plate racing. I think we're going to see a little bit of anything and everything with this wild card race, and I think we're all going to have to strap our belts real tight and get ready for this one after having an opportunity to kind of, I'm not going to say relax because it's just intense in the short track racing, but the big one, no matter how big the big one is at Richmond or Bristol, is nowhere in comparison to what we can see when it comes to some of the action, and more specifically the big ones at Talladega. What couple things should we look out for next weekend?
I'm looking for a very good race. I enjoy the racing at Talladega and Daytona, except if it comes down to a green-white checkers. I think NASCAR's got to figure out some way to straighten that deal out. The way they've got it now with crossing the timeline and everything, get away from that. Go back to just racing back to the flag. Yeah, I realize they're running 200 miles an hour, and yeah, I realize there could be a big crash at the end going for the win and everything, but I'm not the only one that realizes this. The drivers know this too, and they accept that. They know that strapping in, that it could get ugly, it could get bad, it could be dangerous, but that's racing, You either accept it for what it is and do the best you can with it, or you just, you kind of take NASCAR's attitude where I feel like that NASCAR's kind of pushed out on the whole deal. Bring it back to, let them race. Just let them race at the end. I sat there for a couple of hours watching drafting, and I want to see some racing at the end. Don't restrict it, NASCAR. Just let it go. And I don't want to sound callous, and I don't want to sound stupid because I'm not a driver, but, if it happens, it happens. I'm sorry if a driver gets hurt, but he can get hurt at Richmond. it's part of the deal. So just let them race.
Most definitely. Definitely going to be looking forward to it. So, like I said, Super Speedway Racing, Daytona, and Talladega are definitely fun races for me to watch. I love them. I love the pack racing. I'm not going to say I'm a fan of the restrictor plate, but at the same time I am, because, one, I don't think I don't remember back far enough before there was actually restrictor plate racing. I was alive, but I just don't remember back that far. But I don't know. I like the 2 and 3 wide, and the strategy that goes along with picking the right lane and picking the right dancing partner and making the right move at the right time. And there are just a lot of variables that happen outside of them just racing, and I absolutely positively love it. And we'll definitely be excited to see them back on the Super Speedway next weekend, and can't wait to get in here Monday to kind of untangle, I'm sure, the mess that is going to happen Sunday. Yeah. And looking forward to sitting down here with you and be able to talk about that. Before we jump off here, Facebook group, Thursday night show, what do you got going on?
Right now I got a couple of feelers out. Still waiting to get confirmation from the lady that got hit at Bristol. I really want to talk to her and try to educate some other people that might be going in the pits at a race in the future, to let them know what to expect and how responsible they are. But I don't know if I'll be able to get them on or not, so I'm trying to line up 2 other drivers that haven't confirmed yet, so I won't mention their names, but I promise you, Thursday show, Racing with Big Sweat, it's going to be a good one, so check us out at 9 o'clock. It'll definitely be worth sitting in for.
And for those that are not a member of your Facebook group, let them know about that.
Yep, I've got a Facebook group, NASCAR and Other Racing. We had, I don't remember exactly how many comments yesterday. I think it was about 600. But we do have a lot of participation from a lot of members, trading light jabs back and forth about their drivers and other people's drivers and stuff like that, asking questions, why did they do this, or why is he changing that? So it's, it's informative, but it's a lot of fun at the same time. So I think you would be quite happy to join our group and possibly even learn something about racing. There's a ton of groups out there where you can talk trash about other drivers and everything, but we don't that. We try to focus on the actual sport itself and what's going on and what's happening in racing, and we cover all racing. We do, this weekend we had Formula One thread, we had an IndyCar thread, we had the 4-wide Nationals at Charlotte thread. I mean, we talk about it all. So if you're a race fan, not specifically a Kyle Busch fan or just a Sprint Cup fan, if you're a fan of all kinds of racing, this is the group for you.
Most definitely. I love being able to get a lot of different information from there and have a lot of different conversations with a lot of different members over there. So if you guys are not a fan, or if you guys are not part of that group, make sure you guys get over there and join NASCAR and Other Racing. You will not be disappointed. Can't wait till Thursday nights.
And one more thing. On Tuesday, tomorrow, I'll post my blog, co-titled by Samantha Bush. It's called NASCAR Shit, Racing with Big Sweat. So that'll be up tomorrow, and check that out. It's a more unfiltered look at how I feel about what happened this weekend, as opposed to what I can post in my group. We don't do that in the group, but I will talk trash about everybody on my blog. So check that out tomorrow too.
Most definitely. Make sure also you guys tune in back here at 9 o'clock on the 110 Nation Sports Radio Network, the 110 Nation Sports Show, as we'll be talking about Tom Brady being his 4-game suspension being reinstated, Steph Curry out for at least 2 weeks with an MCI or MCL tear. Many other topics tonight. I know we got a couple big names later on in this week. Mason Mitchell and Brady Broswell making the return to the 110 Nation Sports Show as well. Looking forward to have them on. But 9 o'clock tonight, make sure you guys tune in as well. Make sure you guys check us out on Facebook, the 110 Nation, 110 Nation Sports. Check us out on Twitter as well, at 110 Nation. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Steve, thanks for hanging out with me and making my job very, very simple. Always enjoy having you here in the studio with us here on Rubbin' Is Racing. Can't wait till Thursday night to be able to sit in and listen to Steve and Mike talk more racing and be able to learn something new and be able to become a fan of a couple more drivers. I think that's what is so great about the Thursday and Sunday night show for me is I get to learn so much in racing period, but to get to have new drivers to look out for and be fans of. And so very, very excited about that. And, of course, back here Monday night to wrap up Talladega. I cannot wait for that. You guys have a great night, and make sure you guys catch one of the shows later on this week, and we'll be back here next Monday night. You guys have a great night.
I'll see you Thursday.